Folks in?
Absolutely.
Folks in?
Absolutely. Hello, you're joining Conversations on the Commons. We're letting people in. Meanwhile, feel free to be here while haven't started yet and talk about the weather with us or whatever else it is that you want to talk about. And hi, Ray. Thank you for turning on your camera. This is Mike. So while we're waiting, I encourage everyone to put their name and their affiliation in the chat. And because we share it afterwards, it's good for networking. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you.
Morning, how are you doing?
All right.
I received your response and I've sent a note off to the conference committee. Hi,
Good.
Jane, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you? Thank you for all your help, by the way.
You're quite welcome.
Welcome, everybody. You're at Conversations on the Commons, and we encourage you to, while we're waiting, to put your name and affiliation and email address in the chat, which we share afterwards. Then we encourage you to turn on your video and participate. It's always those academic minutes, huh? Jane, do you think it's be ready to start?
I don't know how, are there people waiting or not? I'm ready. Would you like me to?
Might as well.
Okay. Well, good afternoon and happy spring. Now we just needed to come. Welcome to Conversations on the Commons, a project of the Massachusetts History Alliance. And Conversations on the Commons are just that, informal conversations, and you are invited to participate in the discussion, ask questions, and use the chat. This event is streamed live on YouTube, and those of you watching there are invited to comment and send questions, which we will monitor to the best of our ability. I want to remind you of an upcoming program on April 2nd. It is the third History Studio Author Series, and it will be Elizabeth Sheehy talking about her book, A Home in Woods Hole. So check that out. And also in April, we're hoping to have a conversation on Latino history. So starting with some housekeeping, once we start the conversation, please keep your microphone muted until you are called on. It lowers the background noise. This is meant to be an informal conversation. We invite you to turn on your video. If you want to shut it off to eat lunch, we don't care. If you want to eat lunch without it off, that's fine too. But anyway, use the chat. We send it around after. Start by introducing yourself. Put your name, email address, and town of organization if you want to share those. Also comment, ask questions, share resources, or raise any tech issues during the conversation. Let us know if you have something to say by raising your hand or flagging us in some way. And if you are on the phone, just ask to break in. Make sure that your name is correct in the participants list. I always have to change mine. You can do this by hovering over your name in the list and clicking more. If you're on the phone, just click participants and then click your name. And then if we get Zoom bombed, we will immediately close the conversation and send you a link for a new one to start immediately. And we've never had that happen, so just a caution in case. So look at your email if that happens. After today's conversation, please leave us with a survey response. The link is in the chat. For those of you following the live stream on the Commons site, there is a link to the survey in the Conversations archive. And I'd like to thank MHA's top sponsors, which is Mass Humanities, the State Historical Records Advisory Board, Mike Petaski, who is with us here today, and the Dorchester Historical Society. You can find all of our sponsors on the Commons website. The link will be in the chat. And we'd also like to invite you to list your organizations in the Commons directory and sponsor the Commons. Everything costs money. If you can only spare $25, we'll gladly have it. And any participation that you want to join in on, just let us know. So I'm going to introduce the moderator, and it is Plume Boresius. And she is a board member of the Mass History Alliance. She's also the head of the program committee. She is the principal of Swift River Press, public history and communications, working with historical organizations on their planning and projects, as well as the management of their historic buildings. Previously, she was assistant director of Mass Humanities and lecturer in history and literature at Harvard University. Her alter ego is writer and photographer Agatha Owen. We're very happy to have Plume available with all her activities, to join us and be moderator today. So Plume, take it away.
Thank you, Jane. You're always so gracious about introducing. It's really wonderful. Today, we're going to be talking about publishing. We're kind of doing a series on publishing in Massachusetts history, and we've done 2 history studios with 2 different authors who publish in 2 different ways. We have got a 3rd one coming up. And after that, I'm going away for a while, and then we'll do a few more. And we're trying to basically sort of cover the gamut of what is out there, what kind of publishers are available. And but today we're doing a conversation on the Commons on the topic with 2 people who know all about it. They are long-termly active in presses, in history presses. Let's see. About our topic today, the gold standard of having done research in local history used to be to get it published. In other words, you know, your research didn't exist unless you got it published, sort of. Is publishing still the imprimatur from the history community that it once was? If you want to bring your information to the public or sell it, might you as well create a website or self-publish even? Or does it have advantages having you or your organization's book published by an actual publisher? What does it take to get a publisher interested in your work? What does it get you? What series are out there? What trends? Join us for a conversation with tips from two seasoned pros from the publishing world. And I'm going to start by making live our poll, which basically asks who is in the room. And once we know that, I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one. And so it's a short poll, so it shouldn't take very long at all. Basically asking who are here. And I think everyone, oh, we've got a little bit more. Got just a few more people working on it. And I think that's about it. I'm going to end the poll. Is anybody still working on it? Screech? I'm not seeing any screeching happening, so I'm going to close the poll. And the result is that 57% of you are with a local historical society, museum, or historic house, and a pretty much evenly divided smattering of people from educational organizations, government agencies, and preservation organizations, and 20% are other. That makes me really interested. I'm really curious who the 20% are, whether they are with presses or anything like that. So thank you, welcome. We have two, the way it goes, Conversations on the Commons is we have two peer panelists. We ask them to introduce themselves for about 5 minutes. And after that, I will be asking them questions and also asking you questions. And if you have ever done this, and we'll have a conversation. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Erin Vosen. She has been an acquisitions editor with Arcadia Publishing, the nation's leading publisher of regional and local history, for 22 years. Born and raised in New England, she currently resides in New Hampshire with her family. Her work through Arcadia has allowed her to combine her love of history and writing with the joy of connecting with historians, community groups, and archives across the country to share their passion for their community stories. Welcome, Erin. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. As you mentioned, I've been with Arcadia for 22 years. My role as an acquisitions editor is to find new projects for Arcadia, the Arcadia imprint, which is the photo-heavy imprint of the two, Arcadia Publishing and History Press. So I work primarily with historical societies, libraries, community historians to share the stories of their towns, develop new projects, work with them through the proposal and contract stage, and just get the project rolling before we dive fully into the production end of putting the books together. I work with authors across all 50 states, so I have the opportunity to learn a lot about the really unique environments from region to region. It's been very helpful with some Jeopardy questions. Lots of fun facts have come about over the last 22 years, but it's really enjoyable to get to work with people who are really passionate about their community and wanting to share that.
Okay.
Clune, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I just realized it, and I had put my script in front of me. I had to get rid of it. Our second panelist is Mary Doherty. She became the third director of the UMass Press in 2014. Before coming to UMass, she worked at both Bedford St. Martin's and Houghton Mifflin in Boston. She earned a PhD in American literature from Rutgers. Mary collaborates with all members of the press staff, and she manages the press's financial and strategic planning, university relations, and fundraising. She also manages the Juniper Literary Contest. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm very pleased to talk with all of you. As you may know, the University of Massachusetts Press has a regional imprint. It's called Bright Leaf Books, and that's where we focus on history, mostly cultural history, about New England. More broadly, the University of Massachusetts Press publishes 40 to 50 books a year, the vast majority of which are scholarly books. We also publish the Juniper Literary Contest, the winners of the Juniper Literary Contest, which includes creative nonfiction, a novel, short stories, and 2 books of poetry. So that's really fun. And that concludes in August, or in the end of September. But at any rate, in terms of history publishing, the press has always published titles within the discipline of history. We've sometimes shifted our specific disciplinary interests over the years, but our interest in New England is longstanding. It's from the 60s, from when the press began. History of New England, history of the region. We also publish the leading series in the historiography of public history, which is edited by UMass scholar Marla Miller. And as you may know, public history is a really vibrant field for both undergraduates and graduate students. And it's a field with many, many wonderful practical dimensions, many practical and applied questions. And Marla's series really generated the scholarly and historiographical underpinnings of the field. Now, a lot of people are in the game, but I like to point out that she was there early on. We publish all sorts of different kinds of histories. We have a long-standing series in the Cold War, history and culture of the Cold War. That's now very global. We now call it Cold War and Beyond to account for the forever wars, alas. We have a few new scholarly series in the study of childhoods. We have a new scholarly series in the transformation of books into digital objects. So that's called Page and Screen. And that's about how technology continues to evolve. And we also have a new series, which I think is very exciting. It's called Black New England. It's a historical series, but it is interested in the history of African-American folks up until last week. So its chronological scope is very broad. It's a pretty new series. And you can check it out on our website, which we may end up on at some point. But I'm delighted to be here and eager for your questions.
All right. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
I have a whole bunch of questions, and we were already so enthusiastically talking to each other when we were preparing that I'm sure you both have a lot to say. The first question is really the one that I asked in the blurb with which we announced this conversation, which is that the gold standards of having done research in local history used to be to get it published. Is publishing still the imprimatur from the history community that it once was? If you want to bring your information to the public or sell it, might you as well create a website or self-publish? And I'll asking Erin about that. What do you think about that? And then I'll ask Mary.
I mean, it's an excellent question. I think it still is a high goal, at least from a lot of the folks that I talk to be able to share the stories, especially from, the perspective of our books. sharing the photographs and sharing the personal community stories before they're lost. Because often they're captured in these small organizations and the greater community just doesn't have access to them. So I think there's definitely still a strong desire to be able to put something tangible together to allow folks to have that preserved and go back and visit it. It certainly depends on each individual and what their access to materials are. For our books, of course, the really big factor is the availability of images, which isn't always easy to come by. Finding 250 vintage pristine photographs is a task in and of itself. So for some of the authors that we work with, something like a website or a community page is a good option if the materials aren't there. But luckily, I think we've come so far with so many publishers that can fit so many different needs and access to materials. It still is a really great way to be able to share those stories.
Thank you. Mary, what do you think?
Well, I think it really depends on your goals and how your goals align. I mean, this is following up on what Erin just said, but it really depends on how your goals align with the publisher's goals. If you want to get published, if you want to make money, that's kind of a slightly different conversation. I can attest there's not a ton of money floating around in the book space. So on the other hand, rather, if you engage in self-publishing, you want to be careful about your money. You don't want to self-publish with outfits that demand a lot of cash from you up front. That's very different than a research subvention, which I can talk about. But it really depends on your goals and the goals of your work. And one of the best ways, I think, still to find a publisher that aligns with your goals is to examine the books that are most influential on the project. I always visualize a shelf, a little mini custom shelf of 5 to 10 books that are most relevant to the work you've done. Those books may even have the same publisher. If they're all Arcadia books, that's going to be important. So that's a great place to start. What are the most important titles that you're in dialogue with that are like your project? Size those up, make a list. And the wonderful thing about 2025 is that all the resources for publishers are generally available on the web.
Mm-hmm.
Every publisher that's up and running has a website, and we have a whole space on ours devoted to author guidelines, proposal guidelines. And it's important to have a thick skin and not have your feelings get hurt. But what you're really looking for is a match, a fit. It's not a euphemism in publishing. It's not a polite way to say no, thank you. It's rather a real alignment of mission, yours and theirs. And so that's what you're looking for. And the website should tell you everything you need to know. And one thing that's important when you're hunting for a publisher is to understand how they want to be communicated with. They'll tell you on their website. So that's just etiquette. It's just P's and Q's for today to figure out how they want to be communicated with and follow that. So
I usually self-publish my books, but I worked with a friend who was trying to figure out whether she wanted to go to a press or not. And her main objective was that she could pass her research on to future generations. And so she wasn't sure whether she should build a website or, she wanted to make sure that people would not have to start from scratch because she had done a lot of work. And in the end, she decided to go with a book. And the reason is very simple. It's that what archivists say is if you want something to really last a long time, then you better print it out because the digital media, in the end, they go away. You have a website, it stops when you stop paying for it, So, it'll get taken up in the archive. So, which means that somebody can find it, but that's a different story from actually being.
right.
So what do you think about that as a reason for publishing? People, especially in local history, who've been working their whole life in researching certain questions and topics, and they want to somehow communicate it. Do you have anything to say about that, either of you?
Well,
the lasting.
I think two things. I think publishing a history for your family or your people or your clan, I think that's great, especially if you've done the work. I would say go for it. I mean, and I totally agree with you about the fact that technologies are so rapidly changing. You know, we've all heard the term link rot. It's a darn shame when things disappear, intentionally or not. So, you know, I think there's a vulnerability to digital materials. Um, and I will tell you that at the press, we do everything pretty much belt and suspenders. We have obviously tons of things in paper because we print books, but also we keep digital backup of everything. So we do both because the technologies continue to evolve, and so we just do both. But in terms of I think the choice between website or a book also has to do with the material itself. I mean, so people keep surveying students about when they're going to flip to ebooks, and students say, no, I'd really rather read print. And I think narrative things really work beautifully, and photo books work beautifully in print. And websites can serve other purposes. So I think it's important to think about the project.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's really the key, is thinking about the project, the audience, and also, you know, the marketability of your project. You know, family histories, things that are very, very niche topics, very deserving of a work. But at the end of the day, the publishers also have to consider the market and if they're going to be able to reach the target market to make that a viable project to take on. So that's another, I think that should be definitely considered in the direction you take. Self-publishing may be a better option for those more niche topics where you have the ability to print, you know, 100 copies and you can distribute them locally. There's a lot of great, more local historical organizations that will work with authors to do something along those lines versus trying to go through a bigger publisher who just simply isn't going to be able to make that a financially viable project to take on.
That makes a lot of sense, and actually that can influence your project too, of
Mhm.
course. If you think, you know, I would really like to make a book out of this, then maybe you need to do some other work with it that really makes it have a greater reach, so that you know it becomes something that a publisher might be interested in. Okay, so we are already deeply in some of our questions, but I have another question, which is, how, in your opinion, has the field changed for authors? You know, let's say compared to even 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Mary, you said something about white linen tablecloths yesterday, the other day.
Um, well, I should say that an author of mine, the lovely and wonderful Paul Boyer, once said to me, I figure you're out having lunch every day with white tablecloths. And that was probably 20 years ago. And at the time, I joked with him because 20 years ago, it would have been 20 years ago. So, you know, we're not doing the 3 martini lunch anymore, and I never could have. But anyway, the ways that publishing has changed for authors are many, many, many. And of course, technology leaps to mind. I think, I mean, Erin, I'm assuming Erin and I have to deal with this every single day, right?
Yeah.
And the changes aren't bad. I'm actually just now writing a grant proposal about updating some of our old file formats because technology has allowed us now to create one set of files and then push out multiple formats. And that's a great boon for everybody, authors included. It's, I think for authors, certainly in our space, you know, in small university, small university presses, um, there are more opportunities now for authors who are not writing scholarly books. And I can't periodize that development. I just don't know exactly when that started. But a very, very smart friend of mine said that these days it's hard to tell the difference between some big university presses and some big trade imprints. You know, just think about Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. So I think that for authors, these the identities of these presses have started to blur a bit. Their missions may not be as sharp as they once were. But I think for university presses, then that makes more local opportunities for authors who may or may not be on campus. So, and certainly that's part of the the function of our Brightleaf imprint, that they're not necessarily books by scholars. They still have to be peer reviewed. But it's a different venue. So in a lot of ways, it's a lot harder today to get your book reviewed and to find a publisher that fits. There aren't as many spots as there might have been years ago, but there are also always different kinds of spots emerging. And again, it just goes back to finding your fit, finding the place that really aligns with your goals, which took me from a question about the future to the current state. I don't know if that's satisfactory, but that's where we went. So.
Exactly.
what do
I
you
mean, I
think
know
about
for,
us?
for our authors, a great benefit with the technology is access to more online archives that will hopefully continue to stay accessible. The Library of Congress, the New York Public Library has created a huge free online archive of images, which has been a tremendous help for some of our authors who are looking for photographs to fill in some gaps as they're working on their books. So certainly in that way, technology has been great. It also can create a lot of confusion with photographs that they do find on the web and, what's free to use, what's not free to use, questions about copyright. So it's been great in a lot of ways. It creates confusion in a lot of other ways, but, I think all in all, it's made things a lot more accessible, at least for our authors, across the board.
So basically, there's more there's on one hand more guidance, and on the other hand fewer spots, but maybe more specific ways to find out exactly where you belong, if you do your homework. And so doing your homework is what I'm hearing you say, which is good. We all need to hear that we need to do our homework, because we all would like the shortcut, right? we all would like to say, I heard somebody talk about your research, and we, the big press, would like to come and publish our book, and that's just not going to happen. So we need to know that we need to do our homework. I have a question here from someone who said, one person whose questions is for Mary about the book and screen project. And Mary, can you hold on to that question for a moment?
Sure.
And talk about it in a little while, because it is interesting. Somebody says, what do you think about having a thumb drive for keeping information? I assume, Elizabeth, do you want to ask your own question about the thumb drive? There you are.
Hi there. This is Betsy Hanula calling from Westminster. So we've been working, my friend and I have been working for 12 years on a very, I would call it, scholarly book. Of course, 12 years ago, we intended it to be a book, but it's very, very comprehensive, and it's no one else in the country is doing it. It's about the history of the Finnish people who came to Westminster, and we have over 5,000 names of people who at one time of Finnish heritage lived in Westminster. And so, we're tracking people from where they lived in Finland to where they came first in America to when they came to Westminster, who their children are, who their parents are, hoping in the end to make generalizations. So as you can see, and who their children are and where the children went when they left town. So it's a very scholarly thing. And I know from many people that I've talked with all over the country that no one else is doing this. So when I say scholarly, I mean it's really like narrow focused. So with the way that the technology has been changing, we're thinking, well, when we publish it, maybe we really need to just have it available. I mean, that's the whole purpose, to have it available so nobody else has to do this research. And there'll be one place in this country where people can say, okay, we can make generalizations about these 5,000 people. But, you've been mentioning the word web. Well, certainly no one I know is going to host a website. So when you use the word web, I'm thinking, well, since I don't know of anyone who's going to host a website with this information, should we just be creating a thumb drive or something? In the beginning, it used to be we're thinking of a CD or a DVD, but and have the people who have this information then be responsible for transferring it to the next level of technology that comes by. I don't know. It's very important because if we self-publish, of course, it's going to cost us money. And the Finnish population in the country is very tight in the sense that they, a lot of things do get sold with a Finnish heritage in mind. But yeah, it's a big problem. This is why I'm here today to see, well, what do people do, knowing that there's not a terribly wide audience, but the audience that's there is intense. So I don't know. What do you think?
I like it that they're intense. Mary or Aaron, which one of you wants to go first? Okay.
Mary, I'll let you take it if you have
Okay.
initial thoughts. I feel like this is probably more in the wheelhouse of more of the volumes that you all publish. So
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I was distracted by the chat because Charlie Wilson just posted that NEHGS hosts databases of research. So that might be worth checking out for you.
Yes.
And I think it's helpful maybe to keep in mind the distinction between preserving and publishing. And I was gonna go look up all the etymology of publishing, but honestly, I didn't get around to it. But publishing means to make it public, right? To put it out in the world. So that's one exercise. Whereas part of what you're talking about is capturing it, I think, and preserving it for a next generation of folks who, right. So a thumb drive is a secure tool for today to take things from one place to another, throw it in your bag. If you really want to do a secure data transfer, that's fine. But I don't know how much longer they'll be around. I mean, the last time I bought a Macintosh, which was 5 years ago, there were no USB drives. So a thumb drive would be useless to that machine. So I don't think a thumb drive would be your only technological choice. I think exploring NEHGS, as Charlie suggests, might be a good idea. And if their databases only, and if you've really tracked 5,000 people, a database might be an incredibly useful tool to preserve the I think a database could be a really good format for this. Again, books in paper, ebooks, books work for narrative. They work for argument and exposition. They work for, the monograph, the majority of what we publish is a long form argument, right? And for University Press, the key feature of that argument is that it engages with other scholarly books, right? So it's one thing to tell your story, but it's another to say, how does this project fit into the historiography of immigration history? If that's your right. So how is our story different from these other stories? That's really the frame and the apparatus for a scholarly book. Whereas this that you're doing sounds like such crucial spade work. This is really, all this tracing and tracking should be captured probably in multiple formats. I don't think you want to bank on just one. And my 2 cents would be not to bank on the thumb drive.
Right. And, because most of us working on this are historians, we've already created chapters like when we started. And the information that we're finding was now corroborating those ideas that we had originally because we've been in the field for 50 years. So it's I'm thinking it's going to end up probably publishing the narrative part and putting the database on this other system somehow, and to find that, because that's for the real historians who come after us to utilize. But meanwhile, we can still do our take on it. Yeah. So I think that's great. That's a good idea.
So my sense is that what you need is someone to give you some advice on what kind of formats you could work with, and also how to relate narrative, because there is a long history of people publishing narrative and data together. I have here in my closet Only One Cummington, which is a vast volume like this, which has vast amounts of information, and it certainly is still around and able to be looked at for anyone who wants to look at Cummington history and see the deed records of each and every house that was and place that was built there. So maybe you need to work with someone to work on an amalgam kind of format, which might involve a paper format as well as something digital.
Yeah.
I wanted to, and thank you for that question, Betsy, and make sure you talk to me because I have other people I can put you in
Okay.
touch with. Um, and it does get us to, should you be getting an agent? Is getting a book published the end of the publishing work? Do publishing houses do as much PR as you would like? Let's start with the agent. Sorry, Erin.
Okay.
Sorry, I should
So
have given you
for
some.
our purposes, we really don't work with authors with agents very frequently. I can think of one project that we did many, many years ago where the author happened to have an agent. He definitely leaned more towards writer versus traditional historian. He was working on a big corporate history, so it kind of made sense. For our purposes, they're really not necessary. It's not, it just doesn't, it's sort of overkill for what you're going to get involved with our type of project. It's a very small scale. We're a very small scale publisher. Our print runs are small. They're designed to be hyper local, focused specifically within that community. So there's not a lot of, nitpicking that needs to be done. There's not a lot of, kind of beyond the book opportunities that we're really juggling. And you're working one-on-one with a very small team of people from the proposal process all the way through, to the publicity stage of things. So it's a much smaller operation, which makes it much more approachable for everyday folks to just contact us. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your book without having to worry about bringing in outside people to get involved. Certainly when it comes to the contracts, we always encourage authors, if you'd like to have a lawyer review it, absolutely, there's no problem with that. But it's nothing that's going to be very complicated or complex or anything that we're not going to be able to have a conversation and work through questions on that would really require that additional step.
If you want to publish with the big five, you have to have an agent. They won't take your email. They don't, I mean, I worked at the big five. They don't take my emails, I don't take your email. So you have to have an agent to make that connection. Finding an agent is a heck of a lot of work. It's a lot of work. The methods are a lot like finding a publisher. And it's not necessary, as Erin says. I mean, I'm not going to add up in my head, but we do maybe 1 or 2 agented books a year. And I can't say whether or not this connects to a trend. I think it does. We don't do advances anymore. We do, or we do very, very, very little. You don't either.
No, we don't.
We don't do them. We do them like once in a blue moon for a Bright Leaf book, maybe. But so we don't work with agents. And like Erin's shop, if you're going to sign a book with us, you're going to work with a very small team and you're going to negotiate the contract with your sponsoring editor, with your acquisitions editor. So most important thing about a book contract, whether it's self-publishing or a contract for an article or anything, most important thing about a contract is to read it. I'm not kidding. Read it, right? And then ask questions. And if your brother-in-law is a lawyer, you can have him look at it. Understand that lawyers are going to look at very different things in a contract because lawyers always want to make it more airtight and outsmart the other guy. No offense, my brother's a lawyer. I love lawyers, but they're going to look at it in a really different way. And I think for the author, it's mission critical to read it, understand it, hang on to it. It's essentially a quid pro quo. You're going to give us your baby. You're going to give us your book for a specified term. And this is what we're going to do for you in return. So you want to understand the quid pro quo. You want to keep that thing nearby, like next to your birth certificate so that you can refer to it throughout the process. So, let's see, what else? Glenn, what did I miss? Yeah, so we were supposed to talk about agents there. So,
right. So the second question was, is getting the book published the end of the work? And that is for both of you, right? Again.
Well, Erin, I'm going to jump in on that one.
Go for it. Go ahead.
And now I'm climbing onto my soapbox. But if you have spent, Elizabeth, 12 years, did you say? Decades researching Finnish history in Westminster. It's not over when the book is published.
Oh, I know.
Right, because the author is the best advocate for the project. And we were joking around in our prelim conversation. Nobody does book tours anymore. I mean, only Ann Patchett gets a book tour and she does not have fun. So when your book is out, you're its best advocate. You need to set up talks. If you're in a community and a historical society that's already interested in your topic, excellent. You can work with your publisher. They'll help advise you on what you should set up. But from everybody just below Ann Patchett, it's the author's job to get out there and give some talks, have some readings, connect with people. It's in writing is Jane's saying yes. Writing is such an introverted activity, but it flips to this extroverted project once the book is out.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I mean, that's a key part. And we understand it can be very challenging and daunting to try to figure out how to go out and promote yourself. And it's a very scary idea. And we absolutely understand that. And we have a team that works with authors to do it. But the key, it makes such a huge difference to have someone on the ground in the community keeping people excited about the topic versus having a team that's, calling and having to send materials and trying to do things long distance. They can get a foot in the door that we sometimes can't. And even just having an initial conversation and passing it off to your publisher and say, hey, I talked to Tom at the local bookstore and he said he would, maybe love to do a book signing when the book comes out. Great. We will take it from there. We'll contact them. We'll set something up. We can send posters that they can put up. You're not going to have to do all of that, but just if you're excited about your book, it's going to get other people excited about your book. And so having someone there who's, banging the drum for us and saying, look what I did. And readers want to engage with you after the book is out. They have stories that they want to tell you about their grandparents who are featured on this page and they, started this business and they want to be able to have that interaction with authors. So they're excited to talk with you just as much as you're excited to talk with them. And it's also a great way to grow your archives as well. I can't tell you how many authors I've talked with after the book came out. They had folks coming down to the Historical Society with boxes of items, photographs, things that have been in their attic for, years that they didn't think anyone cared about. They didn't realize that people actually wanted these photographs, that these artifacts were something that could be useful. And so it's also a great way to go beyond just the book, but explore other projects that your organization is working on, and just promote additional things beyond just the book. You can tie it into so much more just by talking to folks about what you're doing.
It's a good thing to do, but from my own experience, I know it isn't that easy. My previous book, I wrote a letter to each and every library director in Massachusetts and got a bunch of responses near me, right? Even though the book it's not about Massachusetts, but specifically, it's near me. That people were interested, but farther afield, it was very hard to get a response. And so, if anybody ever has any advice as to opening that box, opening that can, have a can opener to, how to make that happen. And I think it's probably personal phone calls as opposed to emails, is what the thing to do.
I would flip that on its head, Plan, and say that I think it's fantastic you got a handful of replies. That's a good rate. I mean, my first job in publishing was as a college textbook sales rep. And I will tell you, I cried at least once, but that was a hard job. Nobody wanted to talk to you. And I was taught that if you got 1 out of 7 calls to be something productive, that was a great day. So, that's not an uncommon ratio, is my point. Right. We send out tons of feelers and we get back a few things. So
keep doing it. That is the key. Just keep.
And also personal relationships work so much better than a cold call.
Yeah.
Do you guys, let's see. Do you have any ideas about what series are out there for history authors that are outside of your own presses? What kind of places to go? What are the trends in history publishing for more local books? Erin, you want to take it?
I mean, it really depends, I think, on what format you're looking at. I mean, so under Arcadia, we have been kind of building, and bringing on more smaller presses, underneath the Arcadia Press. They all operate independently, so they're not, they're not affiliated directly with Arcadia and the History Press. They've all maintained their own production team, but they focus on, there's a lot more narrative histories that they do. They're all primarily more text-based, although we do have some that focus more on children's history, and incorporating, some more young adult history. So it's, I think there's a lot of options out there. It's really kind of going back to like what Mary said, looking through and finding books that are similar to what you want to do, either in format and or in topic. There's still a lot of small community presses that are out there. It's just a matter of, really digging through and kind of finding what ties into the topic that you want to do, or specifically the format. If there's a specific look that you're going for, if you want a coffee table, book, you need to look for the publishers that are publishing that type of format, because not everyone's going to do it. It's expensive, it's specific. And so there definitely are still a lot of options out there, but it's the legwork to find which one really ties in specifically with your materials, what you envision, and what your goal is. If your goal is to maybe get it out to 100 people, something that's very small in format, that's going to be more of a community-based versus a higher up publisher or a more commercial publisher, because you're going to have a lot more options with that.
Mary.
I was just reminded of what Erin said the other day when we were chatting, which was go to your bookstore.
Yeah.
Talk with your bookseller and talk with your librarians.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was your point, Erin. You said
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I tell authors all the time, if you don't know where to start, go to the bookstore and go to the history section. I know a lot of bookstores now have a local history section, which is great, and just flip through some books and see. And what usually you can hone in on one and say, this is exactly what I would like my book to look like. And that's a great place to start, to just start jotting down the names of those publishers. And then, as you said, go to their website, take a look around, read through their submission process, or read through, what they have to say about the kind of projects they do. And I'm a huge proponent of going to your local library too. They are such a wealth of information and knowledge, and they are also a really great resource, especially I think on the more smaller level as well. If there's nothing in the bookstore that you're looking for and you're thinking this is going to be a more small scale, the librarian is a great place to go, because they know the more smaller community organizations. And so they may be able to point you to a more, a state-based organization or a university-based organization that's not doing a lot commercially, but is working more with community groups to help take something beyond their local newsletter, elevate it a little bit more, so it's something in between, commercial work and a community newsletter that they can really share.
That's really nice advice. I like that. Mary, you have anything else on that, or?
Well, I see in the chat that Ray
That's
is
what I was
asking.
gonna-
Oh, okay.
Great.
Can we go there? Because I think
No,
it connects.
go. Yeah.
Okay. So Ray was asking, can you talk about what you're looking for in the submission process? And obviously I can only answer for UMass Press, but I'm gonna share my screen, which requires a moment of concentration. Can you see that? Do
Oh,
you see
yes.
my mouse? Yeah, okay, good. Okay. This is our biggest book this year. We're extremely excited about it, and I will stop there. But if you go to resources, right there, guidelines for authors. And here are our proposal submission guidelines. And it's not that long, and it tells you everything that you need to know about how we want to be, what we want to see in a proposal. And The second paragraph begins, before submitting a proposal, please consider whether or not your manuscript fits our publishing program by reviewing our subject list, our series list, and the books in which we specialize. This is obviously completely subjective, but as you're making your list of potential publishers and ranking them, you want to go with the tightest fit. And you want to look at it with a little skepticism. You know, if we published one book in 1974 about something tangentially related to what you're doing, that's not a great fit, you know. But if what you're doing aligns with a frontlist book, a new book, a book within the last 5 years or so, or as this guide says, our subject list, which is a hot link, you click it, they're all there, our series list. And when you're dealing with a university press, you're dealing with an engagement with existing history, right? A scholarly history. It's going to be in dialogue with the kinds of books we've already published. So that's just something to pay attention to. So there's the guidelines. Our guidelines are very polite. They don't say, please don't give a call, but that's kind of standard practice these days, because if you call in, I'm just being honest here, if you call an editor, they're going to be very busy and, like everybody, right? And a little harried, maybe. Erin's nodding, so I think I'm on the right track. But you won't put your best foot forward. And even if you just say gently, you know, I just want to know if it's a good fit, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to really let the editor see the whole project. So my advice would be to study up on the guidelines and then submit the proposal in the format described. If, in your view, the website is not clear enough about whether they want it by email, which is what we want, then that's appropriate to shoot off a quick email and just say, do you want my proposal in an email? Or, you know, we still get some in paper, which doesn't help us, because then we can't shoot it around to anyone else if we were interested. So I would say study up on those guidelines, which is probably what I'm saying all day. But
And
does that
we have
help, Ray? Did that? Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say we have something very similar. It's a little more bare bones, but if you go to the Arcadia Publishing website, we have I think it's called the Make Me an Author page, and it outlines. And you can just right through the website. You can send us a query. It's it's short and sweet. We don't put our proposal form on the website it's intentional. We want to be able to have a conversation with you first before you dive into working on that, because we do have two imprints that are very different. The initial online submission is helpful for us to first try to figure out which route is the best one. So when you're plugging in, it just asks for name, contact information, and a brief synopsis of what your project is. The more specific you can get, the better. If you're thinking lots of images versus lots of text, that immediately helps us determine which imprint is going to be the best fit. If you're not sure, then just, a brief summary of what you have in mind, specifically including the location. I can't stress it enough. We get so many that just says like a state name. It's helpful to have the community name in there for us, because everything we do is so hyper local. And on the History Press side, we have multiple editors who are covering different areas of the country. For Arcadia, I'm all 50 states. So if you have an Arcadia inquiry, it's me. But just shoot us a submission through the website, and then it gets forwarded onto the right team. And then we can pick it up and have some conversations to determine, is it going to be the right fit, and figure out exactly what direction we're looking at before we have you submit a proposal.
That is really clear and really wonderful. I'm very happy that there are more and more places that have very clear guidelines, because at least you can go there and see what it is they want. So I have a very specific question. So let's say I'm a local history person and I've been working for some time on this project, and I have, but at which point should I start looking? I want to do a book, but I have some stuff, that I've written. Should I wait until I finish my whole manuscript? Should I go halfway? When is it time to start looking for the publisher? Mary.
I would say for our projects, I prefer you wait to finish the book and talk to us first. because we do have a very specific format that you have to follow. And if you've done the entire manuscript before you contact us and you really want to make it work in our series, there's the potential that there's going to have to be a lot of revision. So I tell authors, for our books, have a firm idea of what direction you think you want to take, particularly where you're going to go for the images, because for our books the images are the make or break. We need to make sure that they're there and we have access to them, not going so far as to actually start taking the images and getting those from the archives, but have the conversation. Say, I'm thinking about doing this book. I see your archive has, X amount of photographs. Would I be able to use them? Find out if there's going to be costs to use them, because that adds up very, very quickly. The photo image fees are the responsibility of the author for our books. We don't ever really want to see authors having to pay out of pocket for those photographs, because at $50 an image times 200 photographs, that becomes, a very, very large amount of money. So for us, having a strong blueprint, but not have actually, fully committed to getting the book together is perfect, because it allows us to really frame it and then send you, once we've gotten through the proposal and the contract stage, our guidelines, so that you have the ability to work on it. Years and years ago, we ran into a few authors who were doing the book ahead of time, borrowing images under false pretenses from archives, without fully telling them exactly what they were doing. And we had to really put the kibosh on that, so that archives are not being cheated out of the photographs that they're lending and not getting the proper payment for those. So we do it in a step-by-step basis of really asking authors to wait until you've got a contract in hand, you have our guidelines, and then we can make sure that all the proper steps are followed.
Oh, so on that question of when to approach an editor, I think it depends on your track record, especially your track record with the press. If you've already published a book with UMass Press and you write your sponsoring editor a proposal as described in the guidelines, they know you can pull it off. And so they'll say, oh, this sounds great. Let's, we could even get you an advance contract on this. If you've never worked with these people before, it might be a good idea to have the whole thing drafted, because of course the writing process teaches you a lot, right? So have the whole thing drafted and then start reaching out to publishers when you can boil it down. We never want to get your whole manuscript right away. We want an overview. We can't read the whole thing right away. We want an overview. We want to know what you're up to. And I'm thinking back too on Ray's question here. Can you talk about what you're looking for in the submission process, which I answered kind of mechanically. Here are the components of the proposal. But the other way to read that question, of course, is what really excites us when it comes across our desks, and in terms of the content. And for us, there's a divide, right? For a scholarly book, we want an argument that advances the scholarly conversation, that has a so what that really sings. I don't know how many of you have ever read Gertrude Stein's autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, but she talks about, when she meets Hemingway, a little bell rings, right? Like she's looking for the little bell to ring, and I'm always looking for the bell. Is this an idea that makes me go, oh, wow, that's fantastic. That's a real insight. Not just that nobody's ever done it that way before, but that advances the conversation. That brings, for example, right now, that brings Native voices into this story and they've been absent. That's a really great insight. That's what we want in a scholarly book. For a Brightleaf book, we want a little of that too, but we want it to be more accessible for general readers. So it wouldn't be about debating with other historians as much as saying, here's the story of my town, and yet what I found is that everybody always thought that New Bedford was about whaling, but I've discovered it's actually about candle making, and I'm going to tell you that story. For a broad audience, it's really got to be a story, and Elizabeth's already onto that distinction between the data and the narrative. Think about all the reasons you want to read a good book, right? I mean, when I read on my off hours, I want someone to tell me a story. On my on hours, I might track an argument more closely. So for us, the distinction between a scholarly impetus and a trade impetus has to do with the insight. Is it a great argument or is it a great story? And that says, and you all know this, but it's really what gets us hepped up. beautiful writing. Just beautiful, just strong, vivid, clear, all the good stuff. So those are the kinds of things that get us jazzed up. Ray, did that go more in the direction you were looking for?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. Yep. Thank you.
Let's see. I have questions about whether there are very specific hints that you have. Do you have any? Erin said she might talk about doing your research with respect to where you fit. Topic, format, vision was your
Yeah.
clue.
Yeah, I feel like we've said it so many times already in this conversation, but I mean that's really the meat of it when you start. It's finding the right fit for your work. I mentioned the other day how many inquiries I've gotten of folks who will reach out and say, I love your books. I have so many, I've got 15 of them on my bookshelf. I collect them wherever I go. I want to do one, but I want it to be so much different. And that's great, but it's not what our particular imprint does. So if you are looking to do, something very, very specific, that's where you want to first and foremost spend your energy, is finding the folks that are going to be working in that format. And if you're not exactly sure, that's fine too. We have a lot of authors who will reach out to us and say, this is my idea. I don't know if I want to go more text-based. I don't know if I want to go more image-based. And we will take it from there, and we'll just have conversations and see, what's the material available? Is it this or is it this? And then we'll find the right home for it. But taking the time to look at what materials you have, what direction you want it to go, and then from there jumping into identifying who's going to be the best fit for this is going to save you so many headaches and so much frustration as you're trying to take this work and get it into it. I mean, these books are a labor of love. That's the reality of it. It's a lot of work, and you don't want to waste time by sending it to a bunch of places that just aren't going to even give it the time of day. You've spent a lot of time working on this. You want to find someone who's going to appreciate it just as much as you are.
So
They're out there.
process is better. Yeah.
Yep,
Process is
they're-
better than pink slips.
Exactly. And it is, from our standpoint, it is hard because there are projects that are very worthy and very exciting that we know would make a great book. And if I know it's not going to work in our format, I'm not going to waste the author's time. I want you to find the right place so that this gets in the right hands. Because if we can't get the readership who's going to appreciate this, or we can't tell it in the right way, really, that for us, that's more what it is. If we're not going to be able to tell the story in the right way because you don't have, the photographs to make this work, let's find the right place for it where it will work, so that you can really let the work shine for exactly what it is.
Mhm. That's really nice. Really good advice. Do you have any advice to people who are teaching themselves how to write a book, who need an editor, people who are in the writing process, and there's so much advice out there on the web. Is there any that you think is really good advice, for instance? Where do you go look for information? Because, you talked about having your stuff on your website, and you do, and it's really great. But there's also, when you talk about the more amorphous aspects of creating manuscripts and creating books, there's a lot of advice out there by a lot of people, and I don't know where to look. Maybe you do have some ideas. Mary, do you have any thoughts in that direction?
Well, I think the web is great for a lot of things, like real estate listings or Zoom. But I don't think it's necessarily a great vehicle for good advice. I think this is just my opinion. There's a lot of bad advice out there. And I think humans have a very big role to play in nurturing each other as writers. If you can find a writing group, or a workshop, I would go there. And, in a workshop, it's going to be reciprocal. You're going to read other people's work and comment and mark it up and labor over it, and then they'll do the same for you. So if you can find that would be great. If you can't find it, create it. You only need 2 or 3 other people to share work with, and scholars do it all the time, one-on-one. They don't even make them, George, would you please read this, and so get other people to read your work and get their feedback before you even start talking to editors. Also, take a class. It's a great way to get read for a little bit of a fee, the fee of enrolling, all sorts of nonfiction workshops and classes. Um, I have a friend who's a published writer of memoirs, and she takes classes all the time because her teacher keeps her moving. So, and you can find these online, you can find them through community colleges. I just think connecting with other people is a fantastic resource. There are plenty of good books. Princeton University Press has an excellent series on scholarly writing. They have a good book on proposal writing. There's plenty of good books on developmental editing, and I did not make a list, but I would trust those more than web resources. That's just my opinion.
So what is developmental editing?
So when I talk to undergraduates, it probably doesn't work, but I like to tell them, because I used to think it would blow their minds, but it doesn't. But I used to tell them that there are at least 10 different kinds of editors. And so we've been talking about sponsoring editors, acquisitions editors, acquiring editors, commissioning editors. Those are the first folks you meet in the house. They're the ones who decide, is it a good idea? And all that stuff. So that's the first person you meet. Copy editors are the unsung heroes, I think, of the literary world. Copy editors line edit. They do tight grammatical fixes, word choice. For us, they do citations, which is not a lot of fun. So copy editors get in there and fix your prose so that it's readable and correct. Big houses have production editors, map editors, permissions editors. So there's scores of different kinds of editors. But a developmental editor is the person who is going to take your manuscript apart. They should have some expertise in your field. Maybe they don't have to be like an expert in the town you're working on, but somebody who understands local history, who will take your manuscript apart, who will say, no, don't start with this. Start with this story about this, riot in 1674. That's the place. Move that up here. Lose this part. Developmental editors help you rethink, reorganize the manuscript, fine-tune your argument, uncover your so what. A really good developmental editor might say, you think this book is about Salem, but I think it's about why. I think it's totally about something else. So developmental editors are experts. They're very expensive. They can charge $50 an hour. So, there's that. In a world of finite resources, it's a big consideration. So that's why workshopping your work with peers is kind of a free way to get at some of that advice. But a developmental editor, it's a highly developed skill set. And they just, and then they'll work on your sentences or your paragraphing. They may say, you have this tick. You've said your argument on every single page. Stop that. So it's a pretty frank relationship, but a development editor can do wonders with a manuscript, not to replace the author, but to be your sounding board.
That's really clear, and that's nice. I never really exactly knew who was doing what. Are there any other questions that are out there that people want to ask that we haven't touched on? Anybody else who has anything else? Aaron and Mary, do you have anything that you haven't been able to talk about that you really feel you need to want to bring across? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Well, in my notes, I have AI, which we haven't talked about yet.
No, it's great.
We talked about tech more broadly. AI is everywhere. I don't think it's going to end the world. You remember back to when VCRs were going to destroy the movies? That didn't happen. So ebooks didn't kill books, So I don't know. Maybe AI is more evil and I'm naive. But anyway, AI cuts both ways in the publishing industry. A lot of big houses are looking to AI to save them money on copy editing, proofreading, that kind of stuff. A lot of houses are using AI to generate marketing copy. We only use it at UMass Press to generate keywords, which is part of the metadata. So it helps with what they call discoverability. Keywords are words that people put into Google and then we want them to bring up your book, right? So we are forever loading keywords into our data that goes out into the world. so that people can find the book. So AI is good for that. But we're also on the flip side, we want authors who've written their own content. And we're working on a little teeny tiny amendment to our warranty and our contract that says, I wrote this, AI didn't. Because at this point, I want humans writing our books, because I think they'll do a better job. So it's part of the warranty because it's part of where you vouch for the project. So that's just kind of in the works. So AI is a big deal. Prepare to distinguish yourself from it. But anybody who's an undergrad right now, oh, that's interesting, Beth. Yeah, we can talk about that. Beth's saying that she has 2 publishers who are sending her a contract amendment for royalties when someone uses her content to generate AI, to teach machine learning, right? To use your books to make the AI smarter, right? I'm assuming that's what that is. But you know, undergraduates, and it's very upsetting for professors, a lot of undergraduates use AI to generate a first draft or something that they're going to leave behind. So, you know, it's here. It's not going to go away. So we have to learn how to use it responsibly. And I'll just say one more thing about AI in response to Beth's comment. We've been approached by some gigantic entities to license our backlist. So all of our books, certainly all of our books that are in digital files, for training AI to get smarter. And plenty of my colleagues in the university press world say, well, better on our books than on books that aren't peer reviewed and aren't as strong as our books. That's a valid argument. It may come to that. But so far, I haven't consented to join any of those agreements because I did some quick math and I had smarter people proof my math. And we would get nickels for our backlist for the entirety of our books that are in print. So I declined twice now. I've declined. And maybe it's a patient strategy. Maybe if things never go this way, just like inflation never goes down. But were they to pay us more what our authors are due, then I might go for it. But I'm not going to give it away, is my personal point. It's an individual point of view that I took for the press. I did take it in consultation with lots of people at UMass because I am responsible to the entity. But anyway, those are my thoughts on AI.
I think it's a good thing to talk about, and also to know what you want your relationship to AI to be, as opposed to just going with the flow. I think that's really a good plan, you know. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for a really enlightening conversation. And I do want to say one thing. Why don't I just say it now so you can respond if you want to. I often hear people say, don't self-publish because it costs a lot of money. And that's not entirely always true, because you can self-publish with places like Amazon, Kindle, and others. I think Barnes & Noble now too. You can self-publish in such a way that it doesn't cost money. In fact, you don't have to pay for books because they are printed on demand. What it does require is that you make your own, that you come with a completely done manuscript, including the layout and everything. So that's a whole second question, right? But so I do think that there are vanity publishers and self-publishers out there where you have to bring money, but there is that third option of not having to pay for it. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that that's also true, because I want open communications.
Yes. Oh, I mean, as long as you can do print on demand, you're fine.
Yeah.
You know, that's where the waste. Well, if they ask you for a fee up front and they're not giving you any publishing services, doesn't sound so hot. If they're going to give you the option, they'll do the InDesign files for you, they'll type, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's something to consider. But yeah, it's the printing. And we used to think of printing, and I think Erin and I would be totally on the same page here. We used to think of printing and being thrifty around printing in terms of unit cost. So the more copies you printed, the cheaper each one would be. That's not the way we think about it anymore. Right. Yeah. Because that's a great way to print 1,000 copies and sell 200.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's, presses are also going the way of less overstock, which is good, I think.
Absolutely. In Europe and globally, we do the warehouse is 0 stock. So it's all POD.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I'm very grateful that you came and talked with us today. You've given us really a lot of stuff to chew on and to think about. I hope you also got some of your stuff out there, and I trust that people are very happy to have found out more about their options with you. And everyone else, I'm on April 2nd, I'll be talking with Elizabeth Sheehan, who has published a book with the History Press. And sometime in May, I will be talking with someone who has self-published through Amazon. And I'm still going to look at doing some stuff in the fall with small publishers around New England, like the Levelers Press, for instance, in Florence. So come back to this series. Thank you all very much. Please fill out a survey form. Rachel put them in. I want to thank Jane for her introduction, and also I want to tell you Jane just published her wonderful book, Slavery in the Puritan Village, with the History Press, and it is fantastic. So get that, and we'll talk to you soon.